Hey guys, tonight we drift into the hushed, golden stillness of old Japan. You're standing beside a narrow road, the kind that once stitched the entire country together, winding through cedar forests, climbing misty hills, and dipping into sleepy valleys where lanterns still burn low at dusk. There's a worn signpost leaning at a lazy angle, inked with elegant brushstrokes. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and something richer, soy sauce warming over charcoal, steamed rice, and the whisper of sesame oil. You're hungry, tired too. Your sandals are dusty, your shoulders ache from the load you carry, and the next post town is just close enough to imagine a hot bowl of something simple and deeply satisfying. You didn't expect much, just to sleep, really. But now your senses are waking to every clatter of chopsticks and a waft of miso on the wind. There's laughter in the distance, muted but real. Someone is slurping noodles. Someone else is shouting to turn the fire down. This is where tonight's journey begins. Not with war, or maps, or dynasties, but with a quiet meal shared between strangers along a crooked road. You probably won't survive this. If you came here expecting anything loud, fast, or modern, the loudest thing tonight is going to be the crunch of pickled radish. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from far away, let me know in the comments. What's your location and local time right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. A post town, or shakuba, isn't really a destination. It's a pause. A small, semi-regulated pocket along Japan's network of ancient roads, designed for travelers to rest, eat, and get moving again. But like most in-between places, it evolved its own personality. Some post towns were boisterous, others serene. Some catered to wealthy daimyo lords traveling under the Sankin-Kotai system, others to merchants, messengers, monks, and the occasional actor pretending not to be an actor. But no matter the crowd, the first priority upon arrival was dinner. Lanterns swayed gently in the early evening breeze, casting amber light on packed earth streets. The inns, or harago, knew the rhythm well. Boots off, basin out, rice on. Travelers arrived dusty and sun-chapped. Many hadn't eaten a hot meal all day. Most had only packed dry rice balls or hardened millet cakes wrapped in bamboo leaves, meant more for fuel than flavor. So the scent of actual food, piping hot and prepared by someone else, was as close to luxury as many would get. A typical dinner might begin with a bowl of miso soup, earthy and smoky, its surface shimmering with small curls of tofu and shreds of seaweed. Alongside it, a perfect mound of white rice, short grain and sticky, still steaming. Then the sides, perhaps a slice of grilled mackerel if you were lucky, or simmered vegetables, burdock root, daikon radish, maybe some eggplant soaked in soy and mirin. Pickles were a given. Every inn had its own variation, and travelers grew fiercely loyal to their favorites. Now, imagine this setting. You're seated on a woven tatami mat, legs aching but grateful. The table is low, the bowls are mismatched, and a sleepy cat is curled in the corner beside a worn straw hat. No one's talking much yet. The food is too good, and the silence too earned. Outside, a courier jogs past, his footsteps muffled in the dirt. He won't stop tonight. His satchel is sealed, and his orders are clear. But you, lucky you, get to eat and listen to the clack of the kitchen ladle, the wind rustling through washi paper walls, and the soft sighs of travelers who finally stopped moving. The old post roads, like the Nakasendo or the Tokaido, were arteries connecting Edo, modern-day Tokyo, with Kyoto and other regions. Though much of Japan is mountainous, these roads wove through valleys and coastlines, linking hundreds of such way stations. Scientists still argue over exactly how standardized the inns were. Some claim the Tokugawa shogunate enforced tight regulations. Others say local flair dominated and things got weird pretty quickly. And weird meant delicious. One inn might flavor its rice with yuzu peel stolen from the cook's backyard tree. Another might serve soup so salty it was rumored to cure heartbreak, hangovers, and romantic miscalculations involving kabuki actors. These weren't five-star meals, but they had something rarer: personality. And for a culture that deeply prizes harmony, these small flourishes were how post towns quietly said, "Welcome. We're not Edo, but we're not nothing either." Here's your quirky tidbit. Some inns developed reputation-based menus. If you looked respectable, you got the good stuff. If you looked like you'd stiff them on the bill, hello, fermented millet surprise. One traveler reportedly ordered dried sardines and received what he swore was a single fish and a poem about salt. Of course, some meals weren't quite as romantic. The poor often scraped together a dinner of leftover broth and rice scraps, or nothing at all if inns were full. That's when roadside vendors stepped in, clanging bells and shouting menus like early food trucks. Their specialties? Sweet potatoes roasted over stones, octopus on skewers, and, for the brave, a taro cake said to contain maybe not too many bugs. Still, there was comfort in the consistency. The fire always crackled. The rice was always warm. The bowls always came out in a particular order, with a rhythm that matched the body's descent into sleep, like a lullaby for your stomach. As the night deepens, the lanterns grow dimmer, and the noise fades. The final bite of pickled plum lingers on your tongue. It's sour, a little shocking, but oddly refreshing, like the idea that even in a world without phones or trains or fast food, people still made time to feed each other properly. And with that thought warming your belly, the mat beneath you grows softer, the wind gentler, the road, for now, forgotten. Out on the road again, the world stirs long before sunrise. You wake to the clop of hooves and the low whinny of horses being readied. The scent of rice porridge, plain and filling, mingles with the colder bite of early morning air. You rise stiffly from your mat, shoulders still aching, and sip a mouthful of warm barley tea that's mostly steam and not much flavor, but somehow perfect. The post road ahead curves gently, lined with cedar and pine. Mist clings to the ground in wisps, like forgotten silk. You step carefully, alongside travelers of all kinds, merchants, messengers, monks with prayer beads, farmers herding oxen. And somewhere, in all this quiet hustle, is the sound of something small and tightly wrapped, bouncing in a cloth bundle at someone's hip. That would be lunch. Travelers on these roads didn't expect midday feasts. Instead, they carried food designed for endurance. The star of the portable meal? Umeboshi, a dried pickled plum that's equal parts sour, salty, and vaguely medicinal. Packed inside a rice ball, onigiri, it was a marvel of balance. The salt preserved it. The vinegar cured it. The sharp flavor kept you awake better than any coffee, which is impressive, given that Japan didn't even have coffee yet. Scientists still argue about when caffeine became a daily ritual. But for now, sour plums had the job covered. The bento culture we romanticize today, that had humble beginnings in these cloth-wrapped bundles. Picture it, a square of indigo-dyed cotton tied tightly, containing 2 or 3 rice balls, a few slices of dried daikon, and maybe, if you were fancy, a piece of sweet rolled omelet. All packed tight enough to survive miles on horseback or foot without a hint of refrigeration. Mainstream geography likes to talk about Japan's mountains. And yes, there are plenty. Over 70% of the country is mountainous, which meant these ancient roads weren't exactly gentle strolls. Travelers often had to ascend narrow, muddy trails through forests thick with underbrush and the occasional wild boar. That's where the onigiri became a survival tool. It was durable, pre-portioned, and nearly impossible to ruin, unless, of course, it fell into a stream. In which case, the boar probably won that round. There's a quiet intimacy to these meals. You're not dining in a room. You're squatting under a pine tree, or perched on a rock still wet with dew. You unwrap your food slowly, grateful it didn't burst open in your satchel. And as you chew, you take in your surroundings. Dragonflies darting past, the sound of bamboo leaves brushing together in the wind, and the distant clatter of hooves as another pack horse train approaches. The pack horses themselves were often the most seasoned travelers. They knew the path by smell and memory, trudging forward with quiet dignity. Their handlers, less so. Many were teenage boys hired on the cheap, who spent their days yelling at mules and sneaking extra helpings of lunch when the merchants weren't looking. Some earned reputations as delivery savants. Others got distracted by roadside gambling stalls and wound up eating sour plums under very different circumstances, like explaining lost parcels to angry samurai circumstances. A fun side note, umeboshi weren't just tasty. They were thought to have near-magical health benefits. People believed they could purify water, repel demons, and cure everything from fatigue to heartbreak. Even modern science concedes they contain antibacterial properties. So next time your coworker says their protein shake is supercharged, you can remind them ancient Japanese travelers were downing fruit that basically doubled as a holy disinfectant. As lunchtime fades, so does the noise. The road narrows, winding through groves of bamboo. A bell jingles somewhere ahead. A vendor, maybe. Some carried trays of food suspended on poles, balanced with absurd grace. They offered treats like kusamochi, rice cakes flavored with mugwort, earthy and green, or roasted chestnuts sealed in paper cones. Nothing fancy, but when your legs feel like bricks, anything warm tastes like victory. Of course, there were rules. You couldn't just stop anywhere to eat. Some stretches of road belonged to temples, others to local lords. And if you trespassed while chewing, you might get a polite warning, or a bamboo stick to the backside. So eating became strategic. You learned which clearings were safe, which shrines allowed rest, and which clusters of stone offered both shade and silence. Still, there's something poetic about the act. Two travelers, strangers, crouched on opposite sides of the path, sharing a nod over rice and pickles. No words, just mutual acknowledgement that yes, this road is long, and yes, that plum really does punch you in the teeth. By now, the sun is tilting past noon, and your body is moving without thinking. One foot, then the other. The bundle that held your lunch is now loosely tied around your wrist, stained with soy and memory. The post towns feel further apart now, the road steeper, but your belly's full enough to keep going. Here's your quirky geography tidbit for today. Along certain stretches of the Nakasendo, local farmers planted edible trailside plants on purpose. Not for harvesting, but so travelers could snack without causing damage. Wild mountain vegetables like fuki, butterbur, or warabi, bracken fern shoots, were left semi-domesticated, a sort of edible wayfinding system. How's that for community-based trail mix? By late afternoon, your legs are sore again. The air thickens, insects hum louder, and the promise of another post town draws your thoughts forward. You begin to fantasize about dinner. Something hot, something brothy. Maybe another bite of that weird eggplant from yesterday. The one that tasted like smoke and secrets. But for now, you walk. Past rice paddies shimmering in the light. Past stone statues dressed in red bibs, protecting travelers and children. Past other people who look just as tired, just as hungry, just as quietly determined to reach the next patch of warm food and firelight. You tuck the last sliver of plum between your teeth. It tastes like battery acid and resilience. You arrive at the next post town just as the light begins to slant gold across the rooftops. It's a little smaller than the last one. Less bustle, more smoke curling from chimneys. The air smells sweet here, in that very specific way that tells you someone's boiling soybeans down to their essence. There's a soft bubbling coming from behind thin paper screens, and a sharp bark from a dog tied out back. You've made it. Barely. Your knees aren't happy about the incline you tackled, and your shoulders are considering filing a formal complaint. But the sign at the entrance says Oiwake Juku, and that means warm food, a place to rest, and, most exciting of all, a chance to stop walking. This town's specialty? Fermented everything. You find yourself stepping into a small roadside Hatago inn, where the caretaker greets you with a bow so deep it almost touches the floor. She's already moving before you finish your own nod, gesturing toward the basin, motioning to the sandals, and calling something into the kitchen that sounds suspiciously like, "One more set. This one looks half dead." You're seated quickly, and before long, your table is dotted with little ceramic bowls. Some of them are bubbling. Some of them are ominously quiet. All of them smell intense. Tonight, you're meeting Japan's oldest dinner guest, Narazushi. This ancestor of modern sushi is not the cute little rice roll situation you might know. No spicy tuna in sight. Narazushi is fermented fish, usually carp, packed in salt and aged rice for months, sometimes years. It's pungent, slippery, and widely regarded as an acquired taste, which is the polite way of saying it clears half the room when opened. You brace yourself and take a bite. It's not terrible. Salty, sour, a bit like cheese that changed careers midlife and now freelances as an ocean ghost. You chase it with rice and a sip of sake that's been warmed to exactly the right temperature. Not too hot, not lukewarm. Scientists still argue over what counts as ideal sake warming. But innkeepers along these post roads learned the perfect heat by touch, by steam, by the way the liquid sighs when poured into clay. You're not alone at the table. A merchant is telling a story about a runaway ox. A soldier is massaging his calves and asking if anyone knows a shortcut that doesn't involve a vertical cliff. At the next table, a courier is inhaling pickled daikon with the urgency of someone who skipped lunch and has regrets. All around you, the food ties people together, not just by need, but by shared exhaustion. This isn't fine dining. its survival softened by flavor. Every post town had its own twist. Some became famous for a single dish. One might serve yam porridge laced with chestnut slivers. Another specialized in miso-glazed taro. And still others bragged about their signature pickles, which usually meant someone's grandmother had a secret barrel buried behind the house. Fringe fact: some of those pickle barrels were so old and seasoned, the bacteria living inside them became local legends. Certain innkeepers swore their pickling mix dated back generations. One even claimed it was started with rainwater from the day a shogun passed through town. Whether that's romantic lore or microbial horror show, no one's sure, but the pickles were good. Let's not forget the tea houses, scattered just beyond the inn district. These weren't just for sipping, they were information hubs. You'd stop in for a bowl of sweet zenzai, a red bean soup with chewy mochi, and leave with the latest gossip about bandits on the road or which town was celebrating a lantern festival. Some tea house workers doubled as postmasters, others as informants, and a few, if rumors are true, as matchmakers. Eat a snack, meet a spouse. Efficient. The architecture itself told you what kind of meal you were in for. Larger towns had two-story inns with timber facades and tile roofs. Smaller ones were one-level affairs, sometimes no more than a converted home with 3 guest rooms and a cooking fire that never went out. The floor might creak when the cook walks past. The smoke might cling to your clothes. But the food? Always ready. Mainstream geography doesn't always mention that these roads were more than lines. They were living threads. Post towns were beads strung along them, each one distinct in sound, scent, and seasoning. And for all the planning that went into the Tokugawa shogunate's infrastructure, it was the people who gave it flavor. Literally. Back to your dinner. You've made it halfway through the fermented fish. It's starting to grow on you. Or you've gone nose blind. Either way, you're dunking your rice into a miso stew with roasted eggplant. And suddenly, everything makes sense again. Food this rustic shouldn't be so comforting, but it is. There's one more bowl. Something glistening, dark and sweet. You take a bite and blink. Black soybeans, simmered in sugar and a bit of salt, glossy as lacquer, dessert in a post-road sort of way. And now comes the part where the innkeeper drops by and, without asking, plops a hot towel on your lap and a tiny cup of pickled chrysanthemum stems next to your elbow. You're not sure if it's meant to help digestion, deter ghosts, or just use up leftovers. Probably all 3. Quirky tidbit of the night? In a few extra traditional post towns, certain inns held fermentation ceremonies. Not religious exactly, more like a cooking contest crossed with a science fair. The guest with the boldest palate, read lowest standards, would sample strange pickles and vote for a winner. Prizes included bragging rights, seasonal vegetables, or a commemorative wooden spoon. You lean back, full but not sluggish. The fire crackles. The air has cooled. Someone starts humming an old folk song in the back, and no one tells them to stop. A traveling flute player takes this as a cue, pulls out his instrument, and joins in. Badly. It doesn't matter. This isn't a concert. It's the sound of a world that, just for a moment, has nothing to chase. You stretch your legs. The table has been cleared. Tomorrow, you'll walk again. But for now, your belly's warm. Your hands smell faintly of soy and cedar. And the fermented fish has miraculously stayed down. The night deepens. The last of the lanterns flicker low outside, their orange glow casting long shadows across the packed earth road. Somewhere nearby, a dog gives a lazy bark and promptly goes back to whatever dreams dogs have in 17th century Japan. You're still seated at the table, your bowl long emptied, but the conversation around you has only grown richer. This is the second meal, not of food, but of stories. Inns like this one weren't just places to eat and sleep, they were theaters. Every person gathered had a tale to tell, and dinner was the curtain raiser. Gossip flowed more freely than sake. And let's be clear, there was always sake. Soup was for early evening. Gossip came after dark. A courier lowers his voice to share a rumor from Edo that a certain merchant has been secretly sponsoring kabuki plays banned by the shogunate. A former samurai, now a ronin with slightly too many opinions and slightly too few teeth, insists that a ghost lives near the pass 2 towns ahead. A tea house girl refills everyone's cups while pretending not to listen, which means she's absolutely listening and already planning how she'll retell the story tomorrow with dramatic enhancements. Geographically speaking, post towns were placed roughly every 6 to 10 kilometers along major roads. That's about the distance a person could walk comfortably between meals, which says a lot about historical priorities. But this also meant you had frequent opportunities to cross paths with the same travelers, forming brief, odd little caravans of shared meals and whispered secrets. Some nights, the stories veered into the absurd. Tales of monks who could fly, no proof. Bears who stole lunchboxes, somewhat believable. Or rice fields cursed to grow only in the shape of phallic symbols, surprisingly well documented in local artwork. Scientists still argue over how much of this was folklore and how much was someone drank too much plum wine and now we're stuck with it. But amid the laughter and retellings, something more subtle simmered. There was a communal understanding that food and stories were both nourishment. That stew wasn't just made of radish and broth. It was laced with memory, with regional flair, with the echo of someone's grandmother humming over a pot. And the gossip, that wasn't just entertainment. It was currency, a way to stay safe, to know which roads were flooded, which inns had bad rice, which villages were expecting tax collectors and thus not in the mood for guests. You listen closely. Tonight, a merchant claims that the checkpoint officials in the next province have started demanding soup taxes, a spoonful of everyone's dinner, to make sure it's not being used to smuggle contraband. No one believes him, but now the idea is out there, sloshing around with the sake. The innkeeper, meanwhile, is quietly making her rounds. She refills bowls, adjusts leaning candle, and, without speaking, slips a folded letter to one of the travelers. No one else notices. You do? You weren't meant to. But you also know better than to say a word. Back at your table, the soup pot is down to its dregs. A thick miso base clings to the bottom, burned just enough to smell like someone tried really hard and then got distracted. That's where the best flavor hides. You scrape it with your chopsticks slowly, with the solemnity of someone performing a sacred rite. You're not alone. Across the room, a farmer is doing the same. You nod to each other in silent approval. True culinary respect. Let's pause for a fringe culinary fact. Some innkeepers offered a night broth after the main meal, a concentrated soup of whatever didn't sell, reheated and strained through bamboo. It was served only to those who lingered late, usually guests, too talkative, too lonely, or too burdened with thoughts to sleep. Locals swore it had calming properties. Probably the MSG, or the comfort of being acknowledged when the fire was low. Tonight, someone begins to sing. Not a proper song, just a drifting melody. Wordless, old, something that came from a place where roads didn't matter. Maybe from a village that no longer exists. You've never heard it, but your bones remember it. The entire room goes still. Even the samurai stops complaining. Afterward, no one claps. That would break the spell. Instead, someone refills her sake cup. Someone else offers a pickled plum. The language of thanks is quiet tonight. You stretch your legs, grateful for the warmth in your stomach and the softness of the tatami mat beneath you. Somewhere outside, a nightbird calls. You make a note to ask the innkeeper what it was. You'll forget. That's okay. Before bed, you're offered a final snack. A piece of dried persimmon rolled in rice flour, slightly chewy, sweet, and so full of autumn it might as well crunch underfoot. You eat it slowly, letting the flavors stretch the minutes. Mainstream geography tends to ignore what people talk about after dinner. It gives you elevation stats and rainfall charts, but rarely mentions the joy of communal silence, or how fermented bean paste tastes better when someone's telling a story about a haunted bridge. You lie down at last, wrapped in a thin futon, your head resting on a rice straw pillow that feels just slightly more forgiving than a brick. Someone snores across the room. Someone else coughs. The inn creaks as it exhales for the night. Just before you drift off, you think about the stories you've heard, which were true, which were rehearsed, which will become your own someday, slightly altered, passed on over a new bowl of soup in a different town. Does it matter? You're full. You're warm. You're not walking anymore. That's enough. You wake to the sound of rice being washed. It's not loud. It's rhythmic. Swish, swish, pause. A wooden paddle scraping the sides of a basin. Someone hums a tune with no beginning or end, just looping gently in time with the work. You open your eyes to a room half lit by morning sun, the sliding paper doors glowing pale orange. Outside, breakfast is already underway. You shuffle toward the dining area, still wrapped in a layer of sleep and futon wrinkles. And what greets you is something miraculous in its simplicity: steamed rice, miso soup, a grilled fish fillet, no wider than 2 fingers. And, because this inn goes above and beyond, a soft-boiled egg, still warm, cradled in a tiny porcelain bowl. But don't let the calm presentation fool you. Meals on these roads could be minefields of etiquette. Japan, in the Edo period, was a culture of precision, and nowhere did that precision feel more intense than in the quiet battlefield of communal dining. You didn't just eat, you performed. And every chopstick was a prop with rules, like never point them at someone. Don't stick them upright in your rice. That's for funerals. Don't use them to gesture, stir, or, heaven forbid, spear your food like a medieval peasant. And definitely don't suck on them unless you want to be silently judged by everyone within a 10-mat radius. So here you are, hungry but hyper-aware, trying to remember which end of your chopsticks you should use when reaching into a shared dish. Hint: it's the back end, not the one you've already used to shovel pickles into your face. Across the room, a young traveler has made the mistake of using his fingers to adjust a piece of tofu. The innkeeper doesn't say a word. She doesn't need to. The silence tightens just slightly. A cricket stops chirping. Somewhere, a tea kettle sighs disapprovingly. Etiquette here isn't enforced with violence or shaming. It's more like a temperature drop. You feel it. You course correct. And the moment passes. Scientists still argue over how much of this intense politeness was government engineered versus socially evolved. Some say the Tokugawa shogunate encouraged strict manners to maintain order during centuries of relative peace. Others believe it was more grassroots, born of tight spaces, shared resources, and the simple fact that nobody wants to eat next to someone who chews like a horse. Whatever the cause, the effect is clear. Meals became choreography. Silent, beautiful, sometimes stressful, and also delicious. Let's talk about fish. There's one on your plate right now. Small, grilled over charcoal, served with a splash of soy and a slice of yuzu. You eat it carefully, trying not to leave bones behind, and trying especially not to commit what modern Japanese children are still warned against, the dreaded honzanmai, bone party, a mess of leftover fish skeleton that suggests you're either reckless or carnivorous beyond polite society. Your quirky tidbit today? Not all fish were equal. One, in particular, held legendary status along the post roads: fugu, blowfish, highly poisonous, delicious, and illegal to serve without a license, which didn't stop a few daring inns from trying anyway. There's a story, probably apocryphal, definitely hilarious, of a minor daimyo who demanded fugu at every stop, bragging about how he knew a chef who could cut it blindfolded. One night, his chef got cocky. The next morning, the daimyo woke up, dead. The chef, still blindfolded, insisted the cut had been perfect. It was the fish's fault. Post-road meals could be dangerous like that, not usually because of poison, but because of assumption. You assume the pickles are mild. They're fermented plums soaked in vinegar. You assume the stew is pork. It's burdock root, shaped like pork, and proud of the deception. You assume the dessert is bean paste. Congrats, it's mashed chestnut and sweet potato. And somehow you're okay with that. It's part of the fun, really. The meals were regional, seasonal, and ever-changing. No two bowls of miso were the same. No two towns used the same pickling method. And because refrigeration was, well, not a thing, flavors depended on the weather, the salt, and the cook's mood. Mainstream geography might tell you that Japan's climate zones range from humid subtropical in the south to snowy continental in the north. But what it doesn't mention is how that meant wildly different ingredients showed up on different parts of the same road. You could start your journey with citrusy vinegars and end it with mountain greens and stewed deer. The road was long enough to eat across ecosystems. You finish your breakfast. The last bite is the egg, which you crack gently and spoon over rice, mixing until it becomes creamy, golden, and absurdly comforting. A little splash of soy sauce seals the deal. Someone opens the front doors. Cool air rushes in. It's time to move again. But before you do, the innkeeper offers you a snack for the road, a triangle of pressed rice wrapped in seaweed, still warm from the hearth. Inside, pickled mustard greens. You bow low in thanks and receive the smallest of smiles. You're getting better at this. Outside, the post road stretches on, ribboning through the morning light. You sling your pack over your shoulder, adjust your sandals, and take a moment to appreciate just how full and yet light you feel. The kind of fullness that's more than food. It's familiarity, rhythm, ritual. A meal not rushed, but absorbed. You take your first bite of the rice ball as you walk. The seaweed cracks. The greens burst with salt and tang. And for a fleeting second, the road doesn't feel so long after all. The road begins to climb again. It's gentle at first, a slope so gradual you almost don't notice, until your calves start muttering subtle threats. You adjust your footing on the uneven stones, the trees thickening as you go. This is pilgrimage territory now. The landscape has shifted. It's less about trade routes and more about spiritual goals. Pilgrims walk here barefoot, heads bowed, sandals looped to their packs. Some carry staffs etched with mantras. Others carry little but a pouch of rice and prayer cards. You pass shrines tucked into the folds of rock and moss, and stone statues of Jizo, the guardian of travelers, dressed in red bibs and knitted hats like forgotten dolls. But even on holy roads, hunger doesn't wait for enlightenment. Enter soba. Buckwheat noodles were the great equalizer of Edo period road cuisine. Cheap, fast, and nearly foolproof to prepare. Where rice paddies couldn't thrive, especially in these hilly, less arable regions, buckwheat took over. It was hardy, grew fast, and didn't mind a little altitude-induced hardship, much like the pilgrims. You round a bend, and there it is, a small stall, little more than a wooden shack with a cloth banner fluttering out front. A weathered man is tending the fire, lifting bundles of pale noodles from a bubbling pot with the slow, meditative precision of someone who's done this 10,000 times and only burned himself on 7 occasions. You order a bowl. He hands it to you with no fanfare. The broth is clear but deep, like it's seen things. The noodles, slippery, nutty, perfect, are topped with thin scallion slices and a single shiitake mushroom, stewed until it could probably confess state secrets. You sit on a log bench, legs out, bowl steaming in your hands. And here's the thing. This isn't just food. It's a moment of stillness. You're not eating to move. You're eating to pause. Fun fringe fact. Soba became so associated with travel that entire poems were written about it. One haiku goes, "Soba in the wind, the bowl heavier than the prayer I came to say." Translation liberties were taken. The original is probably sadder. Scientists still argue about soba's origin in Japan. Some trace it to the Nara period. Others say it truly flourished during the Edo era. What's agreed upon is its spiritual connection. It was offered at shrines, shared among monks, and even served to the sick as a restorative. The noodle wasn't just sustenance. It was symbolic, a thin thread connecting body and spirit, much like the road itself. While you eat, the man at the stall strikes up a conversation. He doesn't ask where you're from. He asks how your feet feel. It's an odd question, but you answer. Then he tells you a tale. Once, a monk walked the entire length of the Naka Sendo, eating nothing but soba. He lived to be 117. Probably fiction, still inspiring. After the noodles, he offers soba yu, the water the noodles were cooked in, cloudy, hot, poured into the leftover broth. It's humble, a little gritty, and yet surprisingly soothing, like a sigh in drinkable form. You linger longer than you mean to. Around you, the trees whisper. A breeze carries the scent of cedar and wet leaves. The sun dances on the edge of a shrine roof, and for a moment, the idea of Kyoto or Edo or wherever you're headed feels irrelevant. But eventually, you rise, with a bow, with thanks. As you continue, the road narrows. You pass a group of pilgrims chanting under their breath. Some hold small wooden bowls, others hold nothing at all. A few smile at you, gently, like they already know how far you've come, and that there's still farther to go. Let's talk a bit about the kinds of tea served on these holy routes. The most common? Bancha. Lower grade leaves, roasted, earthy, often flavored with toasted rice or dried persimmon peel. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to comfort. Some roadside tea stands offered it for free, especially to monks and the elderly. Generosity was a virtue after all, even if the tea tasted vaguely like wet rope. And occasionally, just occasionally, you'd stumble on a place serving cold soba, rinsed in spring water and dipped in strong, salty suyu sauce. It was a summer luxury, meant to cool the body and shock the brain into wakefulness. Pilgrims called it noodle rebirth. Okay, only one did, but it caught on. Another fun tidbit? Along these roads, the spiritual and the digestive often collided. You'd find offerings left on shrine altars that were clearly just food. Half-eaten mochi, a single mushroom, a bite of rice. Travelers fed the spirits the same way they fed themselves. Quietly, with whatever they had, and with a sense of reverence that didn't need grand ceremony. You crest a ridge just as the sun dips low again. Below you, a wide valley unfurls. Smoke curls up from another post town. It's still far, but not unreachable. Your stomach isn't empty, not yet, but your thoughts are turning again, toward warmth, toward rest, toward that next bowl of something honest and hot. You pass another Jizo statue. This one's holding a rice ball. You smile. Someone out there has got your sense of humor. The road continues. The path is clear, and the flavor of soba still lingers on your tongue, like a reminder that simplicity, done well, can taste like salvation. Darkness falls fast in the mountains. One moment, the trees are green gold with late light, and the next they're shadows, stretching long and slow across the path. You pick up the pace, not out of fear exactly, but because night brings its own set of rules on the post roads. Travelers are expected to find shelter before sundown. Stragglers risk more than sore feet. The forest doesn't like to be ignored after dark. You finally reach a modest post station tucked into the crook of two hills, not grand enough to host a daimyo, not rural enough to be spooky, just quiet. Two inns, one tea house, and a lot of tired people nodding at each other with the universal look of, we made it barely. Your lodgings tonight are simple. Worn floors, thin walls, a curtain in place of a door, but the hearth is lit, and the scent of roasted soybeans drifts from the kitchen like an invitation you'd be foolish to decline. Tonight's hosts? The night watch crew. Every town had them. The guards, the messengers, the errand boys who ran papers up and down the hills in weather that made frogs question their life choices. These weren't elite warriors or polished samurai. These were the backbone people, and they ate accordingly. Cheap, fast, filling. But here's the thing. Their food? Usually better. Because while the official travelers got set menus and stiff service, the night watch crew cooked for themselves. They used scraps. They used instinct. And they used flavor. You sit at the low table and immediately realize that tonight's dinner is going to be less ceremonial lacquer box and more grab a bowl, it's already boiling. You are handed a battered ceramic bowl filled with miso jiru, miso soup, but bulked out with chunks of tofu, root vegetables, and what looks suspiciously like fish skin. It smells smoky, deep, alive. The broth is cloudy and caramel colored, the kind of soup that has clearly seen a few things and come out stronger. Across from you, a teenage runner is eating with one hand, the other still wrapped in a cloth bandage. He gestures with his chin toward a side dish. Fried eggplant, glazed with soy and sugar. You take a bite. It's like velvet and lightning. You blink. He grins. No words needed. Fringe fact: in smaller post towns, night crews often doubled as fire watch and moonlight cooks. Some even rotated roles. Whoever made the worst patrols had to cook, and vice versa. Which meant everyone learned to be at least passably decent with a knife and a pot. It wasn't gourmet, but it was democratic. Tonight's meal includes a rice porridge, okayu, cooked low and slow, salted just enough to feel thoughtful. You spoon it into your mouth as one of the watchmen begins recounting his strangest delivery, a letter sealed in wax and tofu skin, hand-carried from Kyoto to Edo without stopping. He was 15. His reward? A bowl of pickles and a polite head nod. Not all heroes wear swords. The tea house girl from earlier slips in through the curtain, holding a tray of grilled green peppers. She doesn't ask, just places them down, bows, and disappears again. Someone mutters that she's got a crush on the runner. Someone else mutters that she probably just likes feeding people. Either way, the peppers are charred, salty, and addictive. There's no class here tonight, no hierarchy. You eat beside a courier, a guard with 2 teeth, and a former monk who smells like sake and speaks only in proverbs. One of them sneezes halfway through dinner, and everyone blesses him like it's a religious rite. Mainstream geography would tell you that the old post roads were about movement, efficiency, connecting cities. But nights like this prove otherwise. They were also about holding still, about rest, about creating a place where weary bodies could be fed, not just kept alive. Here's your quirky moment. The guard to your right pulls a bundle from under the table. Wrapped inside, a sweet potato, roasted earlier, and kept warm against his chest like a treasure. He splits it in half, offers you the bigger piece, and shrugs like it's no big deal. It is. Sweet potatoes were survival food, sure, but they were also comfort food. In some areas, families roasted them in ash pits overnight, and the smell was said to guide spirits home. You take a bite. It's soft, golden, and so naturally sweet you forget it wasn't made for dessert. Conversation flows easily now. Not loud, not boisterous, just steady. Someone mentions a new checkpoint being built further down the road. Someone else shares a joke about a rooster who became a town mascot after surviving a landslide. No one laughs hard, but everyone smiles. It's enough. Eventually, the meal winds down. The pot is nearly empty. The rice is gone. Someone offers a boiled chestnut, still warm, peeled with their teeth, and passed without hesitation. You accept it because that's how generosity works here. Quietly, unexpectedly, and often in starch form. Before bed, there's one more ritual. A pot of hot water is brought out, along with a tiny dish of salt and a scrap of yuzu peel. You're told to soak your hands. It's not about cleanliness. It's about transition, from road to rest, from hunger to gratitude. You do as you're told. The warmth seeps into your fingers. The salt stings just a little. The yuzu scent rises and calms. No one speaks during this part. Then, with a nod and a few muttered goodnights, the night watch dissolves. Some head to their posts. Others vanish into tatami rooms behind thin doors. You remain, just a moment longer, letting the warmth in your hands linger. The porridge still hums in your belly. The peppers linger on your tongue. The sweet potato feels like a story you don't need to explain. And just before you rise, the guard with two teeth says, "Sleep well. Don't dream of the hill ghosts. They're jealous." You laugh. At least you think he's joking. You wake with a shiver. The air in the highlands is colder, sharper, like someone swapped out the sky in the night. Even wrapped in your travel cloak, you feel the bite of morning. Somewhere outside, water is being ladled from a wooden bucket, the splash echoing in the stillness. A rooster crows once, half-heartedly. You're high up now. The valleys are below, lost in fog. And your next stretch of road winds straight into the mountains. Breakfast is minimal. Rice, miso, and a single slice of dried persimmon that looks suspiciously like it's been recycled from a shrine offering. You thank your hosts, tighten your sandals, and step out onto the path again. This is a mountain stretch, remote, winding, and quiet enough to hear your own thoughts, which isn't always a good thing. But you're not alone for long. From behind a bend in the path, you hear a familiar jingle, a bamboo bell tied to the harness of a pack horse. Then another, and another. A convoy is coming. 3 horses, 4 porters, and 2 women carrying baskets larger than their torsos. The men grunt greetings as they pass, sweat already darkening their collars. The women? They nod. But more importantly, they smell like lunch. You fall in behind them, matching their pace. They're traders from a northern village, moving bundles of mountain greens, rice crackers, and hand-pressed onigiri down to the next town. And somewhere inside one of those bamboo baskets is your new favorite thing. Mountain bento. Unlike the neat lacquered boxes served in inns, mountain meals were utilitarian and deeply local. What grew here ended up in the box. No imports, no fancy wrapping, just food that could survive altitude, frost, and the occasional bandit encounter. Today's offering? A folded square of paper reveals 2 rice balls, slightly scorched from the hearth. One is filled with salted kombu, black seaweed, glossy and pungent. The other, pickled sansho berries, peppery, citrusy, and known to numb the tongue just enough to make long hikes feel like shorter ones. Scientists still argue over whether that was intentional or just a fun accident of botanical chemistry. You eat as you walk, which is harder than it sounds when dodging tree roots and steep inclines. The porters joke that it's the original multitasking: chew, breathe, climb, repeat. One of them offers you a bite of smoked boar jerky. You accept. It's tough, gamey, and full of the kind of protein that makes your jaw work overtime. Let's take a moment for a quirky fringe tidbit. Some Highland families trained monkeys, not as pets, but as food thieves. No, really. They'd release the monkeys near roads where traveling merchants passed, and if the monkeys got away with something, well, it was just a mischievous incident. No theft here. Definitely no humans involved. Just cheeky monkeys with very discerning palates. The monkeys aren't out today, though. Too cold. Just ravens overhead and the slow rustle of wind through tall bamboo. You pause at a rest station built into the hillside, a shelter with no roof, just a wooden platform, in a view that seems to stretch across half the island. The traders drop their loads with sighs of relief. One of the women unwraps a cloth bundle and begins preparing tea on a portable brazier. It's strong, grassy, and slightly smoky from the pine needles used as kindling. Someone produces roasted chestnuts, wrapped in a sleeve of tree bark. You crack one open and burn your fingers. Worth it. It tastes like every good decision you've made in the last 10 years, concentrated into a bite-sized globe of starch and wisdom. Mainstream geography will tell you Japan's mountain paths are steep, narrow, and carved by centuries of foot traffic. It doesn't always mention the human infrastructure built around survival. Shrines that double as shelters, rock cairns that mark the safest turns, trees wrapped with protective Shimenawa ropes to guard against landslides and, more superstitiously, angry spirits. You finish your tea, repack your things, and follow the convoy as it continues. A narrow pass looms ahead, stone steps carved directly into the mountain, slick with moss and old snowfall. The porters move slowly now, coordinating grunts and momentum. One slips slightly, catches himself with a laugh, and shakes his head like he's dared the mountain and gotten away with it. The woman beside you unwraps another snack. This one she doesn't offer. She eats it reverently. Sweet rice pounded into a bar with dried apricots and crushed sesame. You ask what it's called? She shrugs. No name, just something my grandmother made. That feels right. Some foods don't need names, just memories. You finally reach the summit by midday. The view is absurd. Clouds swirl below you, valleys open wide like paper fans, and the road ahead threads down the other side like a single line drawn with a shaking hand. It's gorgeous. It's intimidating. It smells like someone just opened a jar of pickled garlic 2 steps ahead of you. You laugh. The traders laugh. Everyone shares a last bite. Dried daikon, pickled burdock, salted plum, and then the group splits. They head left, you head right. Another town waits down the slope. But for now, you take a moment. A final chestnut in your pocket, a hint of kombu on your breath, and the taste of altitude still clinging to the roof of your mouth. You breathe in, deep and sharp, and keep walking. The descent is always harder than the climb. Your knees mutter protest with every step, and the slope feels like it's actively trying to trip you. Moss-covered stones shift underfoot, and the air grows warmer the farther down you go. By the time the trees thin and the road flattens, you're more than ready to sit, eat, and possibly never move again. Which makes it all the more perfect when you smell boar, specifically inoshishi nabe, wild boar hot pot, simmering in a cauldron suspended over a fire just beyond a bend in the road. The aroma hits like a warm slap, rich, gamey, thick with garlic and mountain herbs. You follow it like a cartoon character on scent trails. What you find isn't a restaurant. It's a clearing, a few weathered logs, and 3 men in patched clothing sitting around a pot. Hunters, clearly. They've got the tools, the coats, the weary confidence of people who know exactly how far they are from anyone important. You give a respectful bow. One nods back. Another gestures wordlessly at the pot. The invitation is clear. You sit. The boar meat is sliced thin and dropped into the broth right before serving, to cook in seconds. It's paired with mountain vegetables, zenmai ferns, burdock root, and those wide, flat mushrooms that look suspiciously like the ones you are always told not to touch. You hesitate. Good mushrooms, one of the hunters says, chewing. Probably. Comforting. You take a bite. The meat is dense, chewy in that way that says, real animal, real mountain. The broth is sharp with ginger and soy, and the vegetables soak up every drop. You burn your tongue slightly and don't even mind. This is the kind of meal that earns its place by the fire. Let's get your quirky tidbit out of the way early. Mushroom foraging in Edo-era Japan was serious business. Families passed down knowledge of which fungi were edible, which were medicinal, and which would make you meet your ancestors a few decades early. But not everyone paid attention. There were entire folk songs written as cautionary tales about the fool who ate the pretty one. One particularly infamous mushroom, Otama no Kinoko, was so lovely and so deadly that even seasoned gatherers gave it side-eye. Scientists still argue whether these edible or dye mushrooms develop their vibrant colors as warnings, or if nature just has a dark sense of humor. Either way, you're glad someone else did the picking. The hunters eat slowly, with the kind of rhythm that comes from long days and longer roads. One of them shares a flask of shochu, a clear, earthy liquor that burns gently going down. He offers you a sip. You accept. You look like you've seen a ghost, he says with a smirk. Or a mountain. Same thing, you reply. Laughter. The fire crackles. The wind rustles through the tall grass at the clearing's edge. The pot is emptied. Then comes something unexpected, a second course. Wrapped in a leaf and tied with string is a slab of kuzu mochi, a jiggly, slightly sweet cake made from arrowroot starch. It's not dessert in the Western sense. It's earthier, chewier, served chilled and dusted with roasted soybean flour. It tastes like someone tried to make jelly, got distracted, and accidentally invented something better. Mainstream geography would describe this region as part of the Chubu Highlands, forested, rugged, with steep elevation changes and unpredictable weather. But geography doesn't mention how food here adapts like water. What can't be planted is foraged. What can't be foraged is hunted. And what can't be hunted? Well, that's why some travelers pack backup millet crackers. You stretch your legs as the hunters begin packing up. The fire is reduced to glowing coals. One of them ties the lid back on the pot with a strip of faded red cloth. He swears it keeps bad luck out. Probably superstition. Probably effective. You thank them deeply. They nod, wave, and vanish into the underbrush like spirits with excellent knife skills. Back on the road, you walk slower now. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because something in the meal has settled into your bones. Not just warmth, weight, the kind of nourishment that says, you're part of this place now, even if just for today. Let's linger on the foraging for a moment. Along this stretch of road, travelers often supplemented their meals with whatever they could find. Wild garlic, chestnuts, fiddlehead ferns. Some even made their own trail tea by steeping dried orange peel and pine needles in hot water. It tasted like regret and vitamin C, but it kept scurvy away. Practical. There's a rest point ahead, an open structure with a roof, a bench, and a carved wooden bear that someone thought was either charming or terrifying. You sit, pull out a piece of leftover rice from your pack, and chew slowly as the light starts to tilt. The landscape changes here, less dense, more open. You see terraced fields in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys below. Civilization again, which means bathhouses, real beds, and dinner you don't have to identify by smell alone. But you'll miss this. The quiet, the fire, The way wild meat and wild vegetables can make you feel like you belong to something older than a map. Your last bite is burdock root, soaked in boar broth. It crunches, bitter and sweet. You smile. You keep walking. The path levels out at last. You step into the lowlands with legs that feel heavier than your pack. The air is thicker here, warmer, softer, scented faintly with river mist and something sweet boiling off in the distance. You hear children before you see them, laughter and little wooden sandals slapping against stone. This is a village, small, sun-drenched, and anchored by the smell of soy sauce bubbling in iron pots. And here, behind every meal, are the women at the hearth. You pass the gate and spot them almost immediately. Aprons, headscarves, strong arms and stronger eyes. They run the kitchens, the inns, the homes, the open-air tea houses. You watch one woman hammer fish paste into flat cakes with rhythmic precision. Another stirs a pot with a ladle the size of a canoe paddle. A third is laughing with a child as she fans coals beneath skewers of tofu. This is where the real road food happens. You stop at a small inn, low to the ground, built with wide windows and warm wood. No sign, no sales pitch, just the undeniable scent of something rich and umami floating out the front door. You're waved in by a woman who doesn't ask your name, just tells you to sit and kicks a small pillow your way. You do as you're told. The table is low. The room quiet except for the hiss of a clay pot, bubbling over flame. The innkeeper ladles something into a deep bowl and sets it in front of you. No announcement, no menu. Simmered burdock, root, carrots, lotus, and thick slices of fried tofu, kinpira style, stewed in soy, mirin, and just enough red pepper to wake the tongue. You breathe it in before you eat. The scent is earthy, sweet, complex, like someone distilled late afternoon into a sauce. The first bite nearly stops you. The burdock root, gobo, is chewy, fibrous, with a flavor that unfolds like layers of memory. You chew slowly, letting it linger. There's something ancestral in it, something whispered down generations. Let's hit our scholarly debate. Anthropologists still argue over how much of Japan's traditional cooking was matrilineal knowledge. Some say it was pure necessity. Women cooked because men traveled, fought, and worked outside. Others argue it was spiritual, almost ritualistic, handing down recipes as cultural anchors in an otherwise transient world. Either way, what you're eating now was likely taught by a grandmother who learned it from hers, all through taste and repetition. The innkeeper joins you briefly, sits without speaking, and pours hot barley tea into a tiny porcelain cup. You nod. She doesn't smile, but you know she's watching to see if you understood what she served. You sip. It's bitter. Perfect. The inn cat jumps into the doorway, yawns dramatically, then slinks over and curls up at your feet, as if you've been roommates for years. You offer it a piece of pickled daikon. It declines. In the background, a girl helps shell beans. Her grandmother sorts bundles of dried fish, muttering to herself. A neighbor drops by to borrow vinegar. No one knocks. This isn't a business. It's a rhythm. Fringe culinary fact? Some Edo-era women sharpened their knives with heirloom whetstones, said to hold kitchen spirits, not ghosts, just old intentions. It was believed that food prepared with an ill-maintained blade would carry emotional residue. So knives were blessed, whetstones wrapped in cloth, not out of superstition, okay, maybe a little, but out of deep respect for the invisible parts of cooking. Timing, care, silence. Your next dish arrives without warning. Nimono, vegetables stewed so long they surrender all pride. Konyaku, taro, and daikon in a broth so light it almost doesn't taste like anything until it does. Subtle, soulful, like tea that tells a story if you just keep sipping. Mainstream geography might mention this region's loamy soils and plentiful river deltas, ideal for root vegetables. But it doesn't explain how flavor blooms from patience. These women coax depth from scraps. Their food doesn't shout, it hums. The innkeeper finally speaks. One word, more. You nod before your stomach can protest. She returns with a new bowl, smaller this time. Something sweet. Boiled sweet beans and chestnut paste, chilled and shaped into a loose ball, floating in syrup that tastes faintly of black sugar and nostalgia. This is from my mother, she says, so softly it's almost to herself. You chew slowly. It's perfect. Here's a quirky little cultural footnote. In some villages, the title of best cook wasn't awarded. It was respected into existence. Everyone just knew. That woman, don't challenge her pickles. That one, her miso will fix your marriage. Rivalries were playful but fierce. Secret ingredients were guarded more tightly than family gold. Outside, the sun begins its downward tilt. Shadows lengthen. The child finishes shelling beans and sneaks a pickled plum when her grandmother isn't looking. The inn cat shifts position, draping itself across your foot like a sleepy boot. You're full again, not just from food, but from something else. Like you were adopted for an hour into a family with no questions asked. You thank the innkeeper. She nods once. That's all? You step back onto the road with a satchel a little heavier. She packed you a small cloth-wrapped box. One rice ball, one egg, and one soft-boiled bean cake. You walk into the amber light with burdock still on your tongue and warm tea in your belly. And just before the road bends, you hear laughter behind you. 3 women cackling over something you'll never understand, but somehow still feel part of. Dust. That's the first thing you taste in this new town. Not in the food, don't panic, but in the air. The road has widened, the hills have faded into farmland, and this post station sits squarely at a well-trafficked checkpoint, which means one thing, bureaucracy, which also means 2 very different dining experiences, depending entirely on where you sit in the social hierarchy. Tonight, you see both. You arrive just as the sun hits the checkpoint's wooden watchtower, casting a long shadow across the compound. Porters are everywhere, grunting, groaning, shuffling crates, wiping their foreheads. Their meals? You see them being doled out behind a shed. Big wooden bowls of rice gruel, sprinkled with a few bits of something brown and vegetable-shaped. There's a weak stew nearby, and a single jar of pickles passed between 6 men. On the other side of the wall, literally a wall, is the main inn. That's where the daimyo's procession is unpacking. You hear the clatter of ornate travel chests, the barked orders of attendants, and the unmistakable sound of silk sliding over tatami. You've never heard a meal prepare itself with more ceremony, and tonight you're lucky enough to be inside. No, you're not nobility. You're not even pretending to be. But you happen to share a surname with someone useful. Or maybe the innkeeper just likes your face. Either way, a spot at the far end of the room has been offered. You take it, and you sit low. Dinner is served in layers. First comes the tray, lacquered black, edges smooth, gleaming. Then the dishes, 6 of them in delicate porcelain. a lidded soup, a mound of rice too beautiful to eat, grilled eel curled like a question mark, a bowl of marinated greens topped with shredded katsuobushi that dances with heat, a bite of vinegared lotus root shaped into a perfect flower, and a dessert, yokin, red bean jelly, served on a sliver of cedar. The rice alone is better than most full meals, steamed with a hint of sake and a whisper of salt. It practically glows. You eat in silence, watching the daimyo's inner circle move with practiced grace. No slurping, no clattering, just the quiet sound of refined consumption. Mainstream geography will tell you that checkpoint towns like this one were built to control movement, to implement just part of the Tokugawa shogunate's master plan to maintain power. But it won't tell you that the checkpoints also bred status obsession. Meals became proof of a rank. Your dishware mattered. Your pickles mattered. Your soup, heaven forbid it was cloudy on the wrong day, mattered. Here's your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these meals were genuinely enjoyed or simply endured for status. Were the upper class really savoring the subtle complexities of seaweed-rolled carp, or were they counting the bites to match the expected etiquette? Either way, the food was exquisite and exhausting. Back outside, the porters finish their gruel. A few add pickles. One has a tiny paper packet of shichimi, 7 spice powder, which he sprinkles over his bowl like he's seasoning gold. Another waves a mosquito away with a chunk of toasted barley bread. You join them, because one exquisite dinner isn't enough to skip the real meal of the evening. Laughter in the dirt, shared bites passed between calloused hands, and the smell of something actually filling. One porter hands you a skewer of konnyaku, that jelly-like root starch, boiled in soy and sake until it tastes like absolutely nothing, and yet somehow everything. You bite. It squeaks between your teeth, and someone cheers. You've passed the test. Let's talk class dynamics. In post towns, inns were tiered. The high-ranked travelers got the honjin, the best house. Merchants got the waki honjin, the second best. Commoners had hatago, basic lodgings with shared meals and shared futons. And then there were the porters, the runners, the guards. They ate outside or in sheds, squatting in circles, bowls balanced on their knees. But their food? Their food meant something. It wasn't plated to impress. It was cooked to last. Root stews, pickled greens, roasted beans. Food that filled the belly and stuck to the bones. Fringe tidbit? There's evidence that some porters traveled with their own pocket pickle, a tiny gourd filled with fermented daikon, tied to their belt, like a pungent, crunchy talisman. Some even wrote poems about it. Example: beneath my robe, a whisper of vinegar, my only companion. Slightly tragic, incredibly poetic, surprisingly relatable. Back inside the inn, the daimyo's party finishes with a round of tea whisked to froth by a servant with arms like a professional drummer. The tea is bitter, earthy, precise. It tastes of power and old money. You sip it quietly, thankful and amused. Then you excuse yourself. Back in the porter's corner, someone is trying to make pancakes over a fire using leftover rice, soy, and what might be a smashed sweet potato. You join them. You eat half a pancake. It's terrible. It's perfect. The night wears on. The daimyo's compound glows softly behind paper screens. The porters sleep where they fall, and you? You eat one last bite. Rice gruel with shredded radish and miso paste stirred in, and realize something important. The best meals aren't always the prettiest. Sometimes they're just the ones shared by tired people under the same darkening sky. The morning comes wrapped in fog and the scent of seawater. You're closer to the coast now. You can feel it. The air is denser, brinier, and somewhere beyond the next few hills, there's a town that smells like drying fish and fortune. The road slopes gently downhill, and as you walk, you begin to notice small changes. Roofs are shingled differently. The rice paddies are flatter, waterlogged, and nearly every house you pass has strips of something: fish, seaweed, hope, hanging outside to dry. You're on the salt routes now. These ancient roads were arteries through which salt, fish, and kelp moved inland from Japan's coastal villages to the post towns deeper in the country's heart. You've been eating their influence for days without even knowing it. Salt-cured sardines, kombu broth, dried bonito, shaved paper thin. You've tasted the coast even when the sea was miles away. Today, though, you're going straight to the source. You arrive in a coastal town just before noon. It's louder than the mountain hamlets. Children yell, dogs bark, vendors shout their wares. Shiokara, ika no shiokara, fermented squid innards in brine, a dish so polarizing it could end friendships. But it's not meant for tourists. It's meant for people who grew up with it, who understand the way salt preserves more than just food. A woman in a striped apron gestures you over to a food stand. No menu, just a wooden tray of grilled sardines, their silver skins blistered and flaking. You eat one right off the stick. Salty, oily, magnificent. She offers a cup of broth to chase it, a hot, clear liquid brewed from kombu seaweed and dried anchovy. You sip. It tastes like the sea had a good day and wanted to share. Mainstream geography describes Japan's jagged coastline and its hundreds of fishing villages, but it rarely connects the dots inland. The roads from these towns were lifelines, not just for trade, but for flavor. Without them, your miso soup up in the highlands would have tasted like nothing but water and wishful thinking. Your scholarly footnote. Historians debate whether the kombu trade helped unify culinary traditions across regions. Some argue it was the closest thing to a national flavor before the Meiji era. Others say local tastes were so strong that even kombu had to adapt. Either way, it's in everything, from noodles to pickles to the broth in that odd little tea house 2 towns back. You wander through the fish market, past barrels of salt-pickled mackerel, crates of dried squid, and bundles of niboshi, tiny anchovies destined for stock pots across the country. The smell is not for the faint of heart. It's briny, fermented, a little crunchy, but it's honest, and it sticks to your clothes like a badge of honor. Let's pause for a quirky moment. In some towns, children were tasked with chasing off seagulls from the fish racks. Their only weapon? Loud clapping and improvised poetry. One traveler recorded a chant that roughly translates to, "Shoo, bird, shoo. These fish aren't for you. I saw you yesterday. You're rude, and you smell too. Harsh, but effective." Lunch finds you at a small inn near the docks. It's run by a pair of elderly sisters who argue more than they speak. They serve you a bowl of achazuke, rice steeped in hot tea, topped with salted salmon flakes, pickled seaweed, and a scattering of toasted rice crackers. You take a bite and nearly cry. It's simple, so simple, and yet it hits every nerve of exhaustion, relief, and quiet hunger. The broth seeps through the rice like warm kindness. The seaweed adds crunch and umami. And the salmon, oh the salmon, salty, rich, and just slightly sweet. Cured, not cooked. Preserved not to last forever, but just long enough to carry its story inland. One of the sisters watches you eat. When you smile, she mutters something about your posture. You fix it. She still frowns. This is her love language. As you finish the bowl, she brings over a final treat. 2 slices of kombu maki, rolled kelp stuffed with vegetables and tied with a strip of gourd. You chew slowly. It tastes like every grandma you never had. Geographically, you're still a day or two from Kyoto, but the food here feels older than maps. Salt isn't just seasoning, it's preservation, tradition, survival. A language spoken through pickled plums and dried fish and seaweed boiled until it confesses. And when you leave the town, your pack is a little heavier. You've been gifted a bundle of dried sardines. You're not sure why. Maybe because you asked the right question. Or because you ate the entire bowl of ochazuke without flinching. Or maybe because the woman at the stand saw something in your eyes and decided you'd earned a flavor passport. You climb the next hill with the taste of salt still on your lips and dried fish clicking in your bag like seashells, and as the wind shifts behind you, carrying the briny scent back inland, you smile. Because now, wherever you go next, the sea comes with you. The hills roll gently now, green and gold, patterned with fields like patchwork, and the road smooths out beneath your sandals. You've entered festival country. This stretch of post road is dotted with towns that celebrate. Every few weeks, sometimes more often, someone is honoring a local shrine, blessing a harvest, thanking a river, or just throwing an extremely polite rager for no obvious reason. And that means food, ceremonial, chaotic, and completely divorced from the usual road routines. Today, you arrive just as it begins. A long rope strung with paper lanterns swings across the entry gate. Drums echo from the town center. Somewhere nearby, a whistle shrieks and then cuts out, someone testing the fireworks early. You pass under the rope and into a post town turned upside down. The quiet inns are open-air kitchens. The tea stalls are sake stands, and the usual meal rules have been thrown to the wind like so many festival confetti. Someone hands you a skewer, no explanation, just grilled chicken, glossy with sweet soy glaze. You bite. It's hot, sticky, slightly charred, and you nearly drop it in joy. This is Matsuri cooking. Festival food. No etiquette, no precision. Just joy in a bowl or on a stick. Let's rewind. Normally, meals along the post roads followed a rhythm. Arrival, warm bath, light dinner, quiet sleep. But not on festival days. On these days, travelers found themselves roped into chaos. Dancers blocked roads. Children begged sweets from strangers. And local kitchens churned out snacks like their lives depended on it. You walk down the main street and get swept into it. Roasted sweet corn slathered in miso butter. Fried tofu dipped in sesame chili glaze. Pickled cucumbers on sticks, crunching like fresh water. And then, the item you never knew you needed, rice cakes wrapped around skewered shrimp, grilled until the rice crisps at the edges. They call it the ebi mochi. You call it transcendent. Here's your fringe fact. In some regions, festivals featured accidental banquets, traveler-only gatherings that sprang up in the margins. Locals would spot weary faces lingering on the road, press bowls into their hands, and insist they sit. These impromptu feasts weren't written into any official calendar. They happened because people believed the road itself deserved celebration too. You sit at a low bench next to a group of woodcarvers, eating okonomiyaki, savory pancakes topped with cabbage, mountain yam, shaved bonito, and more sauce than your hands can safely handle. They offer you a slice. You accept. One bite, and you're sold. One of them explains that his mother adds grated mountain potato for luck. You nod solemnly, mouth full, tears of gratitude forming behind your eyes. Further down the road, a line forms beside a woman ladling red bean porridge into paper cups. The porridge, zenzai, is hot, cloyingly sweet, dotted with glutinous mochi. It sticks to your spoon and your ribs and possibly your moral compass. You love it. Then come the surprise sweets. You stumble across a vendor selling sugar-dusted rice crackers shaped like foxes. Inari senbei. Next to him, a grandmother serves warm dumplings filled with crushed chestnuts and wrapped in bamboo leaves. She hands you one and winks. "Don't drop it like the last one did," she says. You don't ask questions. You just bow and eat. Mainstream geography will note that these towns were built along major crossroads for strategic travel. What it misses is that crossroads are also one of perfect party zones. They bring people from everywhere: merchants, farmers, actors, pilgrims. And on festival days, that melting pot becomes literal. A traveling puppeteer starts a show in the square. Children cheer. Adults sneak bites of grilled eel from paper trays. You find yourself seated beside a blind flute player who hums between songs and shares his sake. He claims he once cooked for a daimyo. You nod as if it's true. It probably is. Here's your scholarly debate. Some believe these spontaneous meals blurred the lines between social classes, that matsuri food created moments of culinary equality. Others argue the opposite, that the best dishes still went to the best dressed. But tonight, the crowd eating sticky rice balls with their fingers says otherwise. And let's not forget the culinary curveballs. A man sells miso candy, hard sugar discs laced with fermented paste. They're sweet, salty, and deeply confusing. You try one, your taste buds riot, your brain shrugs. You take another. As night falls, paper lanterns flicker to life. Their glow warms the food stalls, painting the road in gold. You hear the slow roll of drums, the clap of wooden sandals, the hiss of yakitori on open flame. The celebration winds into something softer, dancers forming circles, parents corralling sleepy children, and travelers like you, sinking into benches, full beyond words. Someone sets a small plate beside you, mochi topped with kinako, roasted soybean flour, and a drizzle of black sugar syrup. You pick up the soft dumpling and bite. It sticks to everything: teeth, fingers, memory. You finish it slowly, like the night itself. There's no check to pay, no name to leave. Just nods, and full bellies, and the sense that, for a few hours, the road decided to stop being hard. You sleep that night under the eaves of a shrine, full of borrowed meals and strangers' kindness. The stars blink softly overhead. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs in their sleep, and the taste of sweet mochi lingers as the dream begins. The road is quiet again. The festival glow has faded behind you, replaced by the soft hiss of morning rain falling through pine needles. Your sandals are damp, your sleeves slightly sticky from yesterday's sugar binge, and your thoughts oddly serene. Today, you walk without hurry. But the silence is deceptive. This stretch of road is older than most. Locals call it the Ghost Road, not because of any confirmed haunting, though the trees certainly creak like they have opinions, but because of what it held: memories, offerings, echoes, meals not for the living, but for those who passed and never made it home. You pass the first roadside shrine just after dawn. It's tiny, no larger than a doghouse, with a slanted roof and a faded wooden plaque. At its base sits a bowl of rice, still warm, fresh. Someone woke up early to leave it. Beside it, a pair of worn sandals. This is a custom older than maps. Food left for travelers who couldn't complete the journey. For children lost in floods. For soldiers who never returned. For spirits still walking. Sometimes it's rice balls. Sometimes a bit of sweet sake. Once you see a single boiled egg, cracked and resting on a clean leaf. You don't touch them. This food isn't yours. Further down, a mossy stone statue guards a fork in the path. It's a jizzo, one of many you've passed, but this one's cloaked in an old scarf. At its feet, a cup of tea. The steam is gone, but the care is fresh. Mainstream geography will tell you that Japan's ancient highways follow topographic logic: ridges, rivers, and old trade patterns. What it doesn't always capture is how layered the paths became. Every traveler left a trace: a scratch on a tree, a footprint hardened into stone, a bite missing from an apple beside a shrine, and sometimes meals left behind like notes. You pass a rundown tea house, long abandoned. The roof's caved in, the walls silvered by rain. But tucked into the corner, untouched by time, is an old food tray. 3 bowls, arranged neatly. You'd think it was staged if not for the spider webs. Here's your fringe fact. In certain villages, it was believed that sharing a meal with a ghost could ward off bad luck. Not seeing a ghost, mind you. But sitting down where one might have eaten, it was called kaj no shokuji, a shadow meal. Some innkeepers even set out extra bowls during storms just in case. You stop at one such inn for lunch. Still operational. Still oddly silent. The meal is sparse. Rice, pickled mustard greens, miso soup, and a single grilled mushroom. The host says little. Her movements are slow, graceful, like someone remembering rather than acting. You eat quietly. The room smells faintly of sandalwood. When you finish, she places a small mochi on a saucer and says, "For the road, and anyone walking with you." You hesitate, then wrap it carefully in cloth and tuck it into your pack. You don't ask questions. Outside, the mist thickens. The trees lean in. You walk slowly now, conscious of each step. At a bend in the path, you spot another offering, this one different. A wooden box, open to the sky. Inside, a carefully packed meal: rice, dried fish, a slice of egg, a few pickled radish sticks, wrapped in an indigo cloth, printed with the character for safe return. There's no name, no sign, just the food, waiting. Scholars still debate whether these offerings were religious, superstitious, or just compassionate traditions. Was it ritual? Grief? Habit? No one agrees. But everyone seems to respect it. No one takes the food. No one disturbs it. It's understood. Some meals are not for eating. They're for remembering. By late afternoon, you reach a resting point. An old stone platform overlooking a valley of mist and trees. You sit. The silence here is deep, layered. You unwrap the mochi the innkeeper gave you. You don't eat it. You set it down beside you, just for a moment. just in case. The wind picks up. A few leaves spiral across the stone. A bird calls, somewhere above, then quiet again. You finish the mochi in 2 bites. Sweet, sticky, filled with red bean paste and something else, something softer. Maybe it's the memory of kindness. Or maybe it's just excellent craftsmanship. Either way, you feel lighter after. Here's your quirky detail. In some regions, travelers left rice balls wrapped in bamboo leaves at crossroads, not for spirits, for other travelers. A kind of honor system lunchbox. Take one, leave one, except some people got competitive, making rice balls with unique fillings or wrapping them in elaborate cloths. One traveler recorded finding a note tucked inside his, "If this plum was too sour, walk faster." By sunset, the road leads down into a quiet town. No signs, no lights, just one open door and a bowl of soup set on a porch. No one greets you, but the soup is hot, and the mat beside it is dry. You sit. You sip. You don't ask who made it. Some meals, after all, are better when you don't know who cooked them. You eat slowly, watching the mist settle, letting the quiet seep in. And when the bowl is empty, you bow low, place it back where you found it, and continue walking. Just a little softer than before. You've made it to the outskirts of Kyoto. The road here is flatter, straighter, and lined with lanterns that flicker even in the daytime. The foot traffic thickens. Pilgrims, merchants, minor officials, and children carrying festival masks. They all move in the same direction, pulled like threads toward the ancient capital. You pass a marker stone. The inscription is faded, but it tells you what your feet already know. The journey is nearly over, but not before one final meal. It's tradition in these last post towns to mark the end of the road with something special. Not lavish, not boastful, but symbolic. A closing bite. A taste that means you made it. You stop at a small tea house nestled beneath a stand of maples, just beginning to blush red. The Norin curtain sways gently, painted with the single kanji for gate, a clever name. You've reached the gate, after all. Inside, the shop is nearly empty. A woman greets you with a bow and gestures toward a low table beside the window. She says nothing else, and you realize this isn't a menu situation. It's a trust exercise. You sit. Outside, a child chases a paper fan through the dust. A monk rests in the shade of a willow, sipping from a wooden bowl. Somewhere, faintly, bells chime. The pace is slower here, like everyone is trying to stretch out the last few steps. Your meal arrives in a plain wooden box. Inside, 3 small sweets. 1 red bean jelly shaped like a chrysanthemum. 1 tiny rice cake dusted with kinako. And 1 round dango, glazed with syrup, warm and ever so slightly crisped at the edges. The woman pours tea beside you. It's pale, grassy, subtle, almost too light to notice, until you drink it, and then you notice everything. You take a bite of the dango. It's soft, chewy, and just barely sweet, but the flavor blooms with every chew, like a flower opening in slow motion. There's no urgency here, no heat, just grace. This is your final meal on the road, and it doesn't need to shout. Mainstream geography will tell you that Kyoto was once Japan's political and cultural heart, designed in a grid, planned meticulously, influenced by Chinese capitals and local topography. But it often forgets to mention how the food along the roads leading to it changed because of Kyoto's pull. The dishes got simpler, lighter, more deliberate. You weren't meant to arrive stuffed. You were meant to arrive ready. Scholars still argue about this shift in food near old capitals. Was it aesthetic, religious, political? Did the lighter fare reflect the city's refinement, or simply the fact that travelers were too tired to digest anything complicated? Either way, this last meal carries meaning. You sip your tea and glance down at the last sweet, a tiny square of yoken. It looks unassuming. You've had a dozen versions along the road, some with chestnuts, some with black beans, one made entirely of taro and broken promises. But this one, it tastes like completion. A rich, dense sweetness laced with red bean and just the faintest hint of citrus. You close your eyes while chewing. It feels final. Let's not forget your quirky tidbit. In some post towns, travelers custom ordered farewell sweets ahead of time. Tiny cakes inscribed with characters for luck, longevity, or ridiculous personal jokes. One famous merchant reportedly commissioned a rice cake shaped like his own face, which the local children found horrifying but delicious. Your host returns quietly and offers a wrapped parcel. It's a small box of sweets meant as a souvenir. Not to eat now, but to share when you arrive. It's a reminder this journey wasn't just yours. Someone is waiting. And they deserve a taste of the road too. You bow deeply. She bows lower. Outside, the city beckons. Stone bridges, walled gardens, the clink of coins, the rustle of silk. But here, on the last step before arrival, you sit just a moment longer. The tea is finished. The sweets are gone. Your body is tired but whole. You rise, and before you step beyond the curtain, you glance back at the table. Empty now, but full of memory. This was the last meal before Kyoto, and you'll remember its silence for the rest of your life.